We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Sunday night, August 11th, 2024, as we record this episode. The Chicago White Sox and Cubs played out the remaining Crosstown Classic games this weekend, which resulted in the first scheduled Sunday off for the Chicago White Sox in 91 years. It was another odd 2 games as the White Sox almost rallied. In the first game, they were down 7-0, only to lose 7-6 with the game-winning run on base at the bottom of the 9th inning. Then the bottom fell out again late against the Cubs as they won on Saturday 3-1. The White Sox, after losing 21 straight games, breaking that losing streak, have now lost 3 straight games. And 2 performances over the weekend have caught plenty of attention with their struggles. Luis Robert Jr. and Garrett Crochet. We'll discuss what's ailing these 2 players, as there's heavy expectation for them getting dealt this upcoming offseason. And coming up next for the White Sox are the New York Yankees. And then after that, it's a trip to Houston to face the red-hot Astros. So the losing may continue, which is a great time for us to check out what's going around Major League Baseball, especially in the American League Central, as the Guardians and Twins split a 4-game series this weekend, and now it's Twins versus Royals this week. Resetting our season predictions, who do we like to win the American League Central this season? So let's get started. Joining me are Sox Machine's beat reporter James Fegan and managing editor Jim Margulis. And hello, guys. Kind of a subdued Crosstown Classic this weekend with all of the excitement on Saturday. Only saw 1 outfield concourse brawl on Twitter, and 2 fans ran on the field with nothing major going down for Friday night's game. Maybe this season's games lack the juice, James, with the minimal fan activity.
I think the 2 fans who ran on the field Saturday provided their own unique packages of entertainment in some way. Like the first fan, repeated use of the hesitation move. It was kind of like seeing somebody just throw 2 pitches through the order once and just no one's adjusting at all. We didn't really get a chance to see how it would work, if there was a third pitch, but just doing a little slowing up and then speeding up away from the security guards over and over. 3 dominant innings and then pulled before we could really see what else they had to offer. Whereas the other one is just, the White Sox injury levels and troubles in the outfield continuing as, they were wheeled away in an air cast after, the jump didn't land. Jesse Rogers of ESPN, just a really go-to reporter, tried to get a couple questions in as they were grading push past us in the tunnel and the hallway. Excited to see if he writes anything up on it. I know he and Paul Sullivan are probably good bets to follow that story to the bitter end.
What did that look like from your perspective when the fan jumped over the wall onto the field?
Well, we're all like watching the guy who's running around and making moves, and it wasn't really until that person was taken down that we look and see like, oh, the other person has just not moved since then. And I guess credit to the security guards for like realizing that's not a moving object. They dedicated no resources to them and then just doubled back when they were done, which I don't know if I would have the foresight, but I thought they were just like a secure. I couldn't understand why there was. I thought there was like a red bag like on the warning track, but it's just a person.
It's kind of embarrassing to hop over the outfield wall and blow out your knee, Jim. Like, I can't imagine a more embarrassing thing happening to a fan running on the field.
I'm trying to think if that's like, especially like depending how old you are when you do it, because there are a lot of weird ways to like tear a meniscus when you get older. And you hear some people say like, oh, I was playing pickup basketball too long, or I shouldn't have been, playing floor hockey in my floor hockey league. Why did I keep doing that? Versus like, oh, I just tried to start the lawnmower, like, and my knee went. So on the scale of, humdrum getting old to just pushing it a little too hard, I imagine like that's a little bit towards the latter. So you might brag about it, but you also might say like, yeah, I was drunk and in public and being a terrible human being. And that's when I decided to get sober. So you never quite know like how it's going to turn out in, stage of the person's life.
I would peg it from like my afar analysis, the 25 to 35 age range. So I view it as maybe like an inflection point in their maturation process from here on out.
But don't jump over the fence onto the field. That's a much farther drop than expected. So we'll see how that fan recovers, as they both got arrested, rightfully so. For the White Sox, it's 2 more losses, so they have 91 on the season. They have yet to win 30 games. But this was our first opportunity to see Grady Sizemore in action as the interim manager and hear from him pre and post games. James, you were there covering the games for us. What's your first impression of Grady Sizemore, White Sox interim manager?
It's easy to like kind of play into recency, and also I think probably a lot of plaudits will go towards like, oh, there's more energy. These were the most exciting games of the season or most energetic, and yeah, it was one of their 2 of their 3 sellout crowds of the season. So it's there's a lot that goes beyond switching from Grifol to Sizemore that plays into it. It's not necessarily a qualitative analysis because I don't know how much it plays into on-field stuff or even reflecting with players in the clubhouse. I just felt, especially Saturday post-game, that this was like kind of a very open and honest of his assessments. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Like Grifol is the figurehead of a failing reign. He kind of has to put a shine on everything. Sizemore literally kind of has nothing to play for other than pride a little bit in terms of he's not angling for a managerial job. If you take his word for it, and if you take Getz's word for it, like it's not even a possibility or something he's even thinking of. And I just felt like his explanations were kind of acknowledging flaws or acknowledging like latent like issues that I think Grifol would probably feel more pressure to shine up or say that it's not that big of a deal.
Maybe just a little loss in confidence, and that's normal. I think Luis has had a lot this year. I think with the injuries and then with all the trade rumors, I think there's probably a lot there for him. He's been a pro. I'm not too worried about it. Obviously, you want those guys, feeling good and having good at bats. But he's been playing solid D. He's been running hard. He's just going through one of those funks. I mean, it's going to happen sometimes. We want to do everything we can to get him right. But I think it happens. It's just one of those things that we got to battle through. And he's a pro. He's not in there complaining. He's putting the work in. Sometimes you just don't see the results. Look, anytime you think you might be gone or you're not sure, it's going to mess with your head. We're all human. It's going to happen. You don't know where you're going to be or what's going to happen. And, on top of that, he had injuries early, so he missed a lot of time, and that's going to mess with your timing and your rhythm. So I think he just needs to get back to being comfortable, just play free. I think he's just, he's thinking too much up there. And, we've all been there. We've all had those moments where we're just we're not trusting ourselves.
I think fan response has been mixed to like Sizemore saying that Robert was troubled by trade rumors and saying this is kind of a universal thing that it happens to everybody. He also allowed that the injury and layoff was a big factor. I don't think it's necessarily like this means like you shouldn't criticize Luis Robert for being extremely bad, or it's not something that factors into your analysis whether how consistent he can ever be as a player. But I feel like Grifol would feel some extra urge to be like, and we're addressing that, or we talked to him, he's a pro. That thing doesn't bother him. Nobody's thinking of that. No, that's not really on anyone's mind. I think that's more the temptation that, or the type of explanation you try to give that like the trade deadline where seemingly half the team could have it on the idea that they're about to leave. They're pros. They're not really going to be worried about it. Sizemore termed it more like he's being a pro. He's working hard. He's not like, slumping or not. He's not moping or complaining about it, but you can tell that it has distracted or it's, and what Sizemore I think said most bluntly is like, he's not confident up there right now. And that he's too in his own head. So I just thought there was like a way more kind of genuine and honest an approach to it. And I think the ways he, even addressed the Baldwin issue was he kind of explained and broke everything down about like why that happened. And it's ironic that it happened to Brooks Baldwin. I almost think like Brooks Baldwin, like, because, that's someone who's touted for having game awareness and situation instincts and stuff like that. It's almost like he was too smart for the situation in the sense that he so immediately dismissed that anyone would be running that situation that he was already trying to do the next level play of like get up Paredes out at second base, knowing that he'd be kind of the straggler and be counting on a throw home. So not to excuse, like, obviously it's a very embarrassing error, but I think that there was a level of honesty about it or not trying to be protective where you kind of wound up understanding a bit more how it happened than you would be with Grifol. And a lot of that is like, is that Grifol just unable to be upfront about things? Or was that Grifol that, basically the entire season was managing under a front office that probably wanted to get rid of him and under a, playing with a team that's performance made his job status a question pretty much since April.
Yeah, because moving over to the what's ailing Luis Robert, because I think this is a good example, the difference between Sizemore and Grifol early. So Robert, really bad series against the Cubs. He went 0 for 10 with 6 strikeouts. In the month of August so far, Luis Robert is batting .057. In his last 30 games, this is how much he's been struggling. Robert's only batting 171 with a 224 on base percentage and slugging 265. We rarely ever see Robert have a 30-game stretch where he's got his sub 500 OPS, and he only has 2 home runs and 8 RBIs during that stretch, and it's crushed his season stats. He's now batting below 200 for the season with a 262 on base percentage and slugging 397. And as James referenced to the quote, and listening and hearing from Sizemore, Jim, I think a difference between Sizemore and Grifol is Pedro had to lean on how he previously coached at Kansas City when working with all-stars like Salvador Perez or other Royals all-stars when they struggled. That's like his perspective on being an assistant coach. I wonder with Sizemore having been in Robert's shoes as a former all-star, maybe being able to personally relate with Robert and dealing with this particular situation can help coach Robert out of this situation. This is the first time that I think in Robert's professional career, he's ever had someone like Sizemore, a former all-star, trying to help him out through what has been a really long drought hitting-wise for Robert.
Yeah, I'm trying to think when it comes to the kind of coaching Robert's gotten, maybe like Aaron Rowand was the most accomplished coach to work with him, like directly. And even then, like, I'm not sure how much Robert's talent kind of won out and Rowand was just kind of riding shotgun for it and saying, I give him pointers here and there, but it's not like Rowand was saying, I made Luis Robert who he was. Just seemed like there was some direct experience with that. I wonder if it's a case where like, this is where you see Grifol, his lack of major league experience, playing experience, working against him, or just maybe removing a little bit of confidence in diagnosing problems. Because I can imagine if Grifol said about Robert, oh, he doesn't have confidence up there. Robert's, if Robert doesn't like Grifol, or if Robert doesn't want to hear it from Grifol, the charitable, and he's not going to take the response charitably, he might say like, well, what do you know about playing in the majors? Or what do you know about facing major league pitching if you've never done it? And so, when you look at the long running tendency of Grifol to not criticize veterans, or to very, if he's going to criticize, make it very general and say we're addressing it, even if things never get addressed. I always wondered if it's a case where he didn't feel like he had the grounds to criticize major league players, especially just given how much failure he experienced immediately. Like, I wonder if in another situation, if Grifol gets like a normal 3 to 4 months to open a season rather than the 721 record to immediately start his major league career, if he builds the confidence to, builds a little bit of a rapport with players, builds a little bit of credibility, both as a manager and, to the media and a manager with the players, to where he could feel comfortable criticizing a player directly. But in this case, like, Grifol always seemed to shy away from it. Whereas Sizemore, he's been that guy, and not even necessarily like an all-star, which he's been, but just a major leaguer who earned a job and kept it and did it pretty well. So I think that's probably the biggest change to me in Sizemore talking about this, is that, like, he can say it because he's been that guy. And Andrew Vaughn referenced it in one of James' posts about it, saying that, I think Vaughn called him an Iron Man because he played 162, and, because of all the surgeries and, lingering issues that Sizemore had, I wouldn't necessarily call him an Iron Man, but seeing a player like Vaughn call him that suggests, like, oh, he's seen as a major leaguer with staying power, whereas Grifol didn't reach the majors at all. And I wonder if that's a little bit of, maybe not a shot. I don't know if Vaughn was taking a shot, but just something players realize on one level or another, that this guy's done it and another guy hasn't.
It does make me wonder, again, we're going to be looking ahead to the offseason in what type of managers that Chris Getz is identifying and interviewing to be the next White Sox manager. We've been told that it's going to be coaches that are currently in uniform, but that type of experience is vast. I mean, Grifol was in uniform for Kansas City, so technically speaking, with Getz's early criteria, Grifol would still be considered in the running for White Sox manager, even if they ran this back. If Getz was running this managerial search instead of Rick Hahn a couple of years ago, maybe they still interview and maybe they still hire Pedro Grifol. But this whole ex-player type of relationship and being able to relate to specific situations, like, hey, you've been part of trade talks and you didn't get traded and now you're struggling because you're a human being, and there's the whole mental aspect of that game. I know exactly what you're going through, Luis. Let me help you out here and give you some suggestions. Like, that's new. And hopefully it does help out Luis Robert, because it is painful to watch him struggle as much as he has. He does look lost at the plate. We rarely see Luis Robert look this lost for this long. But we also know that Luis Robert could go on a tear in the last 30 games of the season and wipe out this really bad stretch. So I'm not really concerned, not huge red flags, but this is an opportunity to see what Grady Sizemore can do as White Sox manager with a struggling player in Luis Robert.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
The other player that's struggling is Garrett Crochet. And if Robert is impacted by trade talk distractions, is Crochet being impacted by trade talk distractions? Since July 1st, Crochet has only pitched 19 1/3 innings. And that's over 7 appearances, which includes his 1 inning at the All-Star game. Against the Cubs, it's the worst that he's looked this season. 2 1/3 innings, allowed 4 homers, 7 earned runs, 9 hits total. He didn't walk anyone. He did have 5 strikeouts. And I had no clue until I looked up his game log. But the White Sox have now lost 9 consecutive games that Crochet has pitched in. The last time the White Sox won a game that Garrett Crochet pitched was back in Seattle on June 13th. So it's going to be more than 2 months since the White Sox last won when Garrett Crochet pitched. But when the White Sox let Crochet be a starting pitcher at the height of his powers this season, there was an 8-start stretch where the White Sox were 6-2 when Garrett Crochet made those starts. So James, with Crochet, if Robert on the mental side was distracted by trade talks and he's trying to work through that, Crochet, not only does he have the trade talk distractions and the contract extension ask, but there's this whole pitch and innings limit now. Are those a factor in why Crochet has struggled in his last 2 starts against the Cubs and Twins?
He said post game that he felt like his cutter was backing up and not getting glove side, and that this is something that's basically been happening for the last month. And I think his start results would suggest that there's been something up for the last month. And certainly the locations he got hit on were a lot of like stuff splitting the plate as opposed to getting on someone's hands. So he's not wrong. It's not an absurd claim. And certainly his word is that things are not bothering him. It's just like this, he has a very, very concrete reason for why these things are happening. That said, like, he's clearly like, it's worn on him to be asked about this constantly. It's not something he's enjoyed. Could it be a factor? I think it's very possible that he could say yes, he can say no, and I can believe that he's not consciously thinking of it, but sure, it's not a positive.
Yeah, in his last 7 appearances, Crochet's averaging about 21 pitches per inning. So even the effectiveness, James, has been kind of taking a seat back for Crochet, where when he was on his hot streak in May and June, that number was below 15 pitches per inning.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things like that could correlate with it. I think the workload, and I asked him straight up about it, and he clearly was like kind of jostling with the question a little bit. And I think with the fact that he'd given out like a mechanical reason and, pitch shape reason why, like it wasn't like a big reason, like admit that you're tired type of like confrontation with him. But we know where his innings at. We know where they were before, and we know he's kind of in unprecedented territory. So the correlation between a downturn, really not having a dominant start since the end of June to now with the workload limiting he's breached, I think it's fair to wonder about that as well. I also don't think the trade stuff's going away. By all indications, the White Sox are just kind of very much have an intention to kind of reopen with the contenders that they talked to in the offseason or not the offseason, midseason, that they felt were a little bit obstinate and rigid, and see what they can get for a guy that now you would probably project as a regular starter for 2025 and 2026. This kind of, even without the contract extension asked, this kind of second half downgrade or deterioration was probably something we all expected. I think it's something that was inherent when I talked to Sox people to start the season, and they kind of compared it to 2021 Carlos Rodon. We watched that guy run into this wall just at the same time at this pretty similar spot in innings, and it wouldn't be crazy to see that with Garrett, even if he was still able to hit 98 or 99 at portions when he really revved it up. He kind of sounds like it's one pen away, and that he could get it back. And I'm sure I was going to plan on talking to Ethan Katz this week to see how they kind of do on that. But I think it's fair to wonder if it's because there's been a lot dumped on his plate, and there's a lot of things that he's kind of dealing with that are fully new to anything he's dealt with as a major leaguer. That said, I think the White Sox would love to see it perform down the stretch. Could be all the more better to go to the Dodgers and say, can we get Dalton rushing now? The way that they're possibly desiring, if they have a fully healthy and operational Crochet heading into 2 full normal looking years.
Yeah, one thought I had about like Crochet just watching him too is that I wonder if he knows he's limited to 75 pitches or whatever the White Sox have in mind, even if they haven't told him and he knows like, oh, I'm lucky to get 4 innings. If he starts out with like a 27 pitch inning, is he automatically thinking, oh, how do I get back into this? Or is it a case where he just feels like, I just got to put in my 4 innings and clock out? There's just kind of when you have this governor placed on you, Does it change how relevant you feel to the proceedings the way that he did in the first half when he's like, I can go 6 or 7. And, basically I'm free to pitch as long as I'm effective. Jonathan Cannon gives the White Sox a better chance to win than Garrett Crochet does just by nature of the limitations. Maybe even Davis Martin too, based on the way he threw last time out. You probably feel better about them doing more to put the White Sox in the course of victory versus Crochet. Like at best, does he throw 4 innings scoreless and the White Sox are winning 1-0? Like that's kind of how I wonder if there's some sort of element of just adrenaline or intensity where Crochet just knows he's limited.
Crochet actually said like he didn't want to know what his limits are going in because it felt it would change his pitch decisions in the sense like if he's running, a count 3-1 or, in some sort of like long count situation, he feels like he might be tempted to let's just challenge him with a fastball because I can't have this bat go any longer because then I'm going to lose an inning. And for him to say like, I don't want that. I don't want to be thinking about that. I don't want to be told makes me think like it's probably really hard to push that out of his mind. It's something he's very much going to be consciously aware of. And certainly if you thought somebody was maybe challenging guys when they fell behind the count because they were wary of the pitch count, you'd see some sort of result like, I don't know, 4 home runs and 2 in the 3rd innings, all of them on pipe shots somehow. So yeah, I think that's very valid to wonder that. And it was funny you bring up Pallett because when I talked to Paul Janisch about him, one of the reasons why he thought he was so good in the bullpen is he thought that Pallett was very, very conscious of his pitch count and was, kind of rationing or holding back his best stuff. And then when he comes out of the bullpen, he's just firing all cylinders. And that's why they were a little not super inclined to move him back. Because like, this is clicking for him right now. Why throw him back in the mindset we felt was challenging him? Maybe it's something that's down the road where he returns to that, or maybe he just, becomes a dominant bullpen guy. So yeah, I think that's super valid. That's a possible reason.
Obviously, the White Sox would love if Crochet, if they keep him on the 75 pitch limit, 4 scoreless, 9 strikeouts, doesn't walk anyone, because that obviously aids their conversations with teams in the offseason and trading him. But if Crochet continues to struggle late in August and in September, whether you think it's right or wrong, opposing teams, other teams looking to trade for Garrett Crochet are going to use that in their negotiations against Chris Getz in return packages for Crochet. So it's like this delicate balance. You want to get Crochet through the season. You want him to cross the finish line. But you want to start building up some type of positive results to give confidence for teams in the offseason looking to inquire about trading for Garrett Crochet that, hey, this is still the same Garrett Crochet. He still has that potential that we saw in May and June when teams were starting to text and call Chris Getz about his availability for this upcoming trade deadline. And obviously the White Sox held on to Garrett Crochet because of the contract extension, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm hoping that Crochet bounces back. His next projected start is going to be in Houston. And again, the Astros are red hot right now. And that will be a tough test for Garrett Crochet, but we've seen him dominate good teams earlier in the season. Hopefully he does bounce back, and this is 2 projects for Grady Sizemore and the new White Sox coaching staff to try to get Luis Robert and Garrett Crochet back on track.
This episode is brought to you by our good friends at NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. I'm sure by now you've all gotten back into your Sunday routines, but they could be even better. With NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get the most live NFL games all in one place, every game, every Sunday. And you can even watch up to 4 different games at once with multi-view, one of my favorite inventions of this decade. It's exactly what you need to catch all the action, make your Sundays more magical. And also, YouTube TV is great. I got it this year. It's awesome. Sign up now at youtube.com/BS. Device and content restrictions apply. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games.
For the White Sox, this upcoming week, they're still at home. Monday through Wednesday, all games are at 7:10 p.m. Central Time. The New York Yankees are coming into town. And that's not great news for the Baltimore Orioles because right now the Yankees and Orioles are tied for first place in the American League East. Both teams have a 70-49 record. The Yankees in their last 10 have won 6, and they beat Texas Rangers on Sunday, so they have a 1-game winning streak. On the road this year, The Yankees have been very strong. They're 38-22, and for the season series, if you recall, the Yankees embarrassed the White Sox earlier this year at the Bronx, sweeping the White Sox in 3 games, outscoring them 17-5. Your pitching probables for this series: Monday, it's Luis Gil against Kai Busch. Tuesday, Nestor Cortez for the Yankees against Jonathan Cannon. Wednesday, to be determined, but it will be the Dart, Davis Martin taking the ball for the White Sox. For those that live outside of Chicago, Wednesday's game is going to be on Amazon Prime. So keep that in mind. If you have an Amazon Prime subscription and live outside of Chicago, that broadcast will be on Amazon Prime. And for this Yankee series, obviously, I don't think any White Sox fan, realistically, Jim, is expecting big things or maybe even a win because it's the mighty Yankees. But the young pitchers taking the ball, Busch, Cannon, Martin, this is a good test for them, Jim. What can we learn from them against this mighty Yankees offense?
Yeah, it's a mighty offense, but it is a little bit of studs and duds where, there are some guys you can't let beat you. And that's easier said than done because Aaron Judge is, MVP pace, or at least, top 3, and, Juan Soto's running right alongside him there. So, you can only do that so often, pitch around guys, and, you just don't want to set up innings to where you have to pitch to them if need be. But I guess this is one of the benefits of being so far under 500 and being so far out of it is that you can try to challenge guys and you can try to test your stuff. If Judge goes deep, hits one on the concourse, fans are probably entertained, like, oh, I've never seen one hit that far. So like there really isn't going to be any, or I think minimal umbrage by fans, like if they do make an ill-advised decision to pitch to somebody they shouldn't be pitching to. I do think with Busch, it was funny. After his debut, he was asked, like, were there nerves involved? And he said, no nerves. I was just rushing everything. And like, that's nerves, doofus. Like, that's just how they manifest itself. And I know that's just like, you don't want to admit it. And he's just trying to, he's a big leaguer now. He doesn't want to talk that way. But yeah, it was very charming in terms of how he denied it and then admitted it in consecutive sentences about just how he was out of his element. So hopefully it's a case where even if it is the Yankees, it is a second start. He knows that this stuff plays to a certain degree. So he won't beat himself. Like that was the case with his debut, was that he just fell behind too many counts, couldn't set up sequences in his favor. His fastball effectiveness was diminished because like they're looking for a little bit more, but even then they didn't square it up. So he should feel confident that he can try to attack early in counts and doesn't have to nibble so much, or can get away with the occasional mistake. And if he gets burned, so be it. But I think, after beating himself in his debut, it'd probably be a better change of pace for him to let opponents put pressure on him versus putting pressure on himself because he just couldn't quite throw competitive pitches early enough and really just had to nibble and battle and be inefficient and everything like that. So for Busch, I think that's the big thing. Otherwise, Cannon just, will his unique mix and lack of swing and miss stuff, how does that play against a better opponent? But he should keep doing what he's doing until somebody, really takes it to him. And Martin, like, I'm curious to see how he evolves because the cutter seems like a weapon. It doesn't seem like necessarily his go-to, but it can be his go-to depending on the opponent. So I'm really looking forward to his pitch mix, just seeing what he trusts against the best hitters that he's faced yet.
Yeah, for Kai Busch, I guess the good news is that Aaron Judge has been hitting right-handed pitchers better than left-handed pitchers. This is a crazy stat. Aaron Judge this year is slugging .704 against right-handed pitching. That slugging percentage is higher than Andrew Vaughn's and Luis Roberts' OPS. .704 he's slugging against right-handed pitching. So Jonathan Cannon, Davis Martin, James, the White Sox bullpen. This is where I'm not going to say I'm going to check out because I watch every pitch of this season. I made it this far. I can keep going.
Every pitch?
And the White Sox bullpen against the Yankees this week. This is where we could see close games get out of hand real quick.
Yeah. The leverage ladder is still getting figured out. The second trip of Chad Kuhl through the eighth inning didn't go so great. Dominic Leone is like walking out like mid-game the way like Liam Hendricks and Michael Kopech used to. So I don't know if that's like what true closer status is if you get to go to the bullpen at like fourth inning with a big cup of coffee. But maybe that's where he's at. Maybe that's where the leverage ladder is at this point. Um, I feel like we'll probably see some shuffling down the stretch. Especially with training out Tanner Banks, I think they probably give Mago, who they got in trade, a look pretty soon. But yeah, it's open auditions clearly at any point. John Brebby and Steven Wilson, I think based on experience, you'd expect to have like grabbed the chokehold of like the top of that ladder, but you really haven't seen that. You mentioned Kai Busch, like he has reverse splits this year, so he's been better against righties. So effectively, him against Judge is strength versus weakness in the favor of Kai Busch. Obviously, watching him his first start, I think you saw like enough of like righty swinging over a slider to think like that's something that's actually going to work up here, since it was something he relied on so much in AAA. But looking like at his Fangraphs page, and obviously he was nervous, like chase raid, swinging strike rate, anything you'd like look under the hood to see like if it was good or bad, be like, oh. And I think like we all know, like it was his first start and he didn't go great, and it's not something to base big conclusions off of. But it's not like, oh, like, well, it didn't get great results, but he was secretly blowing people away with his four-seamer. Like, no, everything was bad. We just gotta hope that it's just a first start of somebody who, maybe wouldn't have been up this soon, even if there weren't some injuries or trades. If Drew Thorpe is healthy, I don't think we see Kai Busch maybe until September is a possibility. Davis Martin, you mentioned the cutter. I talked to him about it the other day, or I guess Saturday. Yes. It was kind of the invention of, I followed up on the thing that Triffin mentioned on the broadcast about his wrist kind of healing differently from the Tommy John.
Good Triffin.
And Supinate. Yes, I was, yeah. I kind of like set up like in my apartment, like Leonardo DiCaprio and what was it? I forget the title of the movie for the Quentin Tarantino
Once Upon a Time in
movie.
Hollywood.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So it was born of the fact that like he was not getting the same extension, and so his four-seamer lost vertical movement. So they're a little bit like, what do we do here with this? And they realized like, well, if I'm already kind of tilting a little bit on this, what if we just went full bore and tried to cut it? And so he was already kind of he talked about his fastball as a jab, something he'd use around 40% of the time or less. But now he's like super picky about the fastball, and now supplementing it with the cutter by something he can just, instead of trying to throw the perfect four-seamer up and into lefties, he throws something that actually just actively cuts on its own, because it's with the diminished vert, he can't just throw a commanding four-seamer as easily to either side. It's weird. It seems like it's worked for him. And Ethan Katz said that the changeup grip that he used against Oakland to great effect was something he had learned literally the day before his start. So it seems like he's been able to adjust to it on the fly pretty impressively. It'd be strange to be very like showing that we've gone beyond just thinking that four-seam vert is everything if somebody in 2024 lost it and became a better pitcher. But Martin's been able to make adjustments pretty quickly. It's just that he'll have to go like 8 innings to avoid the landmines in the bullpen.
I'm looking at Kai Busch's Fangraphs page. I'm seeing a line drive rate of 0%. They're not hitting him. They can't touch him.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, I have confidence in Jonathan Cannon and Davis Martin. I hope that they could go 5 innings. That would be a great outcome for them. Again, I'm not expecting big things for the White Sox in these 3 games against the Yankees. I'm expecting another sweep, to be honest with you, and games getting lopsided late, because again, even though they are studs and duds, the studs that the Yankees have offensively, Judge, Soto, I'm expecting those two to have big series against the White Sox. And Jim and I will be recapping that game in our next podcast on the off day on Thursday. We are sending James to North Carolina next weekend, as he'll be catching up on White Sox prospects and recent draftees. Again, huge thank you to our Patreon supporters for making that happen. If you want full access to our coverage of the Chicago White Sox and help us out, you go to patreon.com/Sox Machine to sign up. Now shifting away from the White Sox for a little bit here, let's take a look at the American League Central, because while You may be tuning out from the White Sox and so focused on how many losses are going on for the Chicago White Sox. This is a pretty important week in the American League Central. The past 4 days, a 4-game series between the Guardians and the Twins up in Minneapolis. And the Twins won the first 2 games of that series, Thursday and Friday, which shrunk the lead in the American League Central down to 1.5 games at just recently. That was 6 games ago that the Guardians had a healthy lead, but they went on a pretty lengthy losing streak. However, the Guardians were able to bounce back. They won Saturday and they won on Sunday to split the series, even though the Twins had the bases loaded, nobody out in the 9th inning. Emmanuel Clase was able to close out without allowing any runs. So the Guardians were able to leave Minneapolis, splitting that series. This week, Monday through Wednesday, it's Twins and Royals. And right now, there's just a half-game difference between the Royals and Twins, not only just for second place in the American League Central, but also in the wild card. So the standings right now, it's the Guardians at 69-49. They have a 3.5 game lead over the Twins, who are 65-52. The Royals are 65-53. The Twins and Royals are trying to hold off the Astros, the Mariners, the Red Sox for the wild card spots in the postseason. If the season were to end today, both the Twins and Royals would be in the playoffs. But when trying to reassess the American League Central and how everything will play out for the rest of the season, one thing that's starting to catch my attention when you look at projected outcomes and projected standings for teams is that here we are again. The Cleveland Guardians are overperforming their expected win-loss record. And there's this new Twitter account that caught my attention. It's at MLB_simulator. They named themselves MLB Deserve to Win-O-Meter. And what they tweeted out is that the purpose of their account is to analyze how game outcomes can change depending on when a hit occurred. For example, if a team hits well, or they have many hits in a game, but they struggle to still score runs, how can you determine a team's quote-unquote luck factor by how those hits were dispersed in a particular game? I started following them and diving deep into all the graphs that they spit out after games and win probability because, man, there have been some games this year for the White Sox where they'll put up 9 hits in a game, but they only score 1 to 2 runs. Like, how unlucky are the White Sox? Well, according to the simulation, where they will simulate games based on the batted ball data that happened in that game, the net luck for the White Sox is -9. So the White Sox have been unlucky this year. They should have 9 more wins than they currently do. The unluckiest team, the Atlanta Braves. This is a shocking number. They should have 22 more wins this year based on the batted ball data that happened in their games. The luckiest team, the Guardians, +28. And that is very eye-opening. And if you think, well, that's way too drastic, using Fangraphs, their base runs projected standings, which is the expected runs scored versus expected runs allowed based on batted ball data that's happening in games thanks to StatCast, the White Sox are underachieving by 9 wins. The Guardians are overachieving by 10 wins, which leads Major League Baseball when it comes to overachieving or luck. So, Jim, we've had this exact conversation not that long ago when the Guardians surprised everyone in 2022 to win the American League Central. Have the Guardians discovered a new form of devil magic? Like, how are they doing this to, again, exceed expectations by this much?
I'm curious what the correlation is when it comes to like luckiness, outperforming batted balls or hits, etc. when it comes to strikeout rates, because the Guardians have been pretty strikeout avoidance. And I imagine if you put more balls in play, you create your own luck more just by having more things going on. You probably also have some moments where you hit into a double play when a strikeout would have been better. But ultimately, if you're striking out, I don't know how many percentage points more than, say, like the Braves, because there's a pretty distinct difference between how often the Braves strike out and how often the Guardians strike out. Even the White Sox have struck out 1,040 times, Guardians 862. So quite a big difference there, to where they just have more opportunities to get lucky and swing a game. Similar to the Royals when they went to back-to-back World Series, that was their game too, contact. And so it seemed like, when you looked at the lineup, you looked at their, WRC plus, et cetera, like individually, not all that impressive, but probably cumulatively, there was an effect of just having balls in play, guys who could take the extra base. So perhaps a little bit more action generated on batted balls and singles, et cetera, than maybe other teams can do. So that's why I think that this mix has worked for them. And then you factor in like the way the bullpen pitched in the first half, that they can make their own luck. But I do think second half, when you look at their offense, look at Kwan getting cold, David Fry getting cold, like some of the big breakout performances in the first half regressing a little bit. And now you're back to Jose Ramirez and Josh Naylor and looking for that third wheel to stabilize the offense, and not really there. They are falling back into the things they're criticized for in October. Like, who are their big bats? Who are the hitters that teams really have to plan around? And they might be picking like a more eventful route or circuitous route to the same end of just, do they still lack a bat that they really need?
I think what also helps for the Guardians is they are, as a team, very good with runners in scoring position. They're fourth in Major League Baseball in team OPS with runners in scoring position. They're hitting .274 with a .360 on base percentage and slugging .458. Like, that's phenomenal. If there was a White Sox player that had that type of slash line, we'd be losing our minds. That'd be incredible. They're hitting that as a team. And what's even more impressive, James, is like, Jose Ramirez, he's doing it again. Like, this season, Ramirez has an OPS over 1,000 with runners in scoring position. Josh Naylor's got a .940 OPS as well. And it just seems like maybe that's the trick for the Guardians, is like their bottom of the order provides opportunities for Ramirez and Naylor when the lineup turns over to get themselves into scoring position. And is it as simple as, because Ramirez and Naylor don't miss that often with runners in scoring position, that's how Cleveland's able to capitalize on these opportunities?
I mean, when they're, to Jim's point, they're both good contact guys. Like, Ramirez is elite. I want to say Naylor is more like better than the average, like, big left-handed slugger in terms of making contact. We just saw Saturday night with the Miguel Amaya, like, when you're in runners in scoring position, like, the defense has changed. They get much more like kind of avoidant, or they're geared in terms of trying to be able to cut down runners in a way that opens up avenues for not great contact to give you good results. So two guys who can put the bat on the ball. We also know they can impact the ball to a good degree, but two guys who are tough at bats, who are kind of resilient, who aren't going to give you the strikeout in that situation where you really need it, I think allows you to outperform a little bit. And it also goes like down the line to the bottom of the order, providing impact and getting on base. Like, they're not really guys who can hurt you, but they're guys who can provide, do bloop singles or putting balls in play, provide a stray runner that is still around when, the two guys who can really hurt you in the Guardians lineup. As a fantasy owner of Quan, I think there are three guys who really hurt you in the Guardians lineup. MVP this year, part of our 16-1
here we go,
barrage to the league. Basically the reverse White Sox in 2024. I think they're set up well to, they funnel things to seemingly the only two guys who can hurt you very efficiently because of the way they're built.
Well, for the Guardians, they're going to be at home. They're facing the Chicago Cubs, which the Cubs are currently 59-60. So they really could use that series. And the Guardians need that series as well because, again, the Twins and Royals have a 3-game series. The Royals are having their best starting pitchers on the mound. Grady Sizemore, Seth Lugo, and Cole Reagans will be making those starts. Right now for the Twins, we only know Pablo Lopez will be starting on Monday. Tuesday and Wednesday are unknown. And when it comes to hitting with runners in scoring position, obviously, not a shocker. The White Sox are last in Major League Baseball in team OPS. The White Sox are batting .206 with a .263 on base percentage and slugging .325 in those situations. You guys want to guess maybe you already know, which team is the best in Major League Baseball with runners in hitting with runners in scoring position?
See, it's not the Guardians.
It's not the Guardians. They're fourth. It is surprising that there are 3 teams better than the Guardians in team OPS with runners in scoring position.
Red Sox.
Not the Red Sox. It is the Kansas City Royals.
Makes sense.
And I wonder how much it's the White Sox helping them out. The Royals are batting .303 as a team with runners in scoring position this year. They are slugging .487 with runners in scoring position. And I don't want to do the math because it'd be soul breaking of just what their slash line was with runners in scoring position against the White Sox.
I will try to look it up. Give me a couple minutes.
But it has to be high. It just has to be high. So while Jim's looking that up, let's reset the division race. Again, the Guardians have a 3.5 game lead over the Twins, 4 games over the Royals. James, with the rest of the season, who do you like to win the American League Central with 44 games left to go?
My pick had been the Twins because, despite like the qualities that we just illuminated with the Guardians, I kind of, the stupid meathead like approach is like I look at the Twins lineup as like, oh, this is not the best team in the division. Now the lineup's been very much weakened. They've had Correa out for weeks, and now already not adding at the deadline at all, and then losing Joe Ryan seemingly for an extended period of time, just in the past week. It's hard. I've been kind of waiting for them all season to be like go on a run and go on a level of dominance that probably the teams that are more built around a collective approach or being cohesive rather than raw talent aren't capable of going. But I think they've taken too many injuries to really expect them to find this like extra gear. Miraculously, I've had Myron Buxton like relatively healthy for him all year and still have been kind of beat up. I think just where you're at with how little seasons left relatively, I just don't think there's room for like the Guardians to fall back to earth in some incredible way. And given the way they've gone this far and the fact that we've seen them kind of string together a weird approach over a full season before, I think they're probably, I would regard them as a favorite at this point. They've showed it up to this point.
Did you figure it out, Jim?
Yes, actually, it's not that bad. There are a whole lot of other bad numbers, but when the Royals against the White Sox, runners in scoring position, 290, 391 OBP, 458 slugging.
391 on base percentage against the White Sox.
I mean, but like relative to their season numbers, like it's not necessarily goosing their season numbers. Like the differences with the Royals against the White Sox, one, men on in general, they're batting .315. So there's that. Also against relievers, batting .310, .406, .497. So it was very much backloaded in terms of success with the runners in scoring position. If it felt bad, it's because they clumped them pretty good. Starters only hit .231 against White Sox starters. So second half of games is where the runners in scoring positions kind of balanced each other out and felt extra painful versus just being what they've done all season, just maybe arranged in the most painful order possible.
So, Jim, I asked James, who does he like to win the American League Central in the remaining 44 games? Who do you like to win the AL Central?
I'll say Twins just because it's still a very delicate way the Guardians have gone about building their roster, and they need all the health they can get. So while the Twins have been dealt costly blows now, like I wouldn't rule out the Guardians having the kind of injury that tilts the scales maybe in the Twins' favor later. So I've been saying the Twins as well, and I think I'm going to stick with them for just a little bit longer.
Am I crazy to think that the Royals are going to win the American League Central at the last minute? The reason I don't like the Twins, Jim, is that they've already lost a tiebreaker to the Guardians. This is surprising to me. Cleveland's 7-2 against the Minnesota Twins this year. So the Guardians already have that tiebreaker, which again, there's no more game 163. So the Twins and Guardians finish with the identical record. The Guardians will earn that either second or third seed in the American League postseason, clinching the division over the Minnesota Twins. So I don't like that for the Twins. And for the Royals are actually 4-2 against the Guardians this year. So they've got 7 more games against Cleveland. And looking at this, but the problem is for the Twins and Royals, this is a big 3-game series for the Royals because the Royals are 2-5 against the Twins. So if the Twins win this series against the Royals, man, this is like a triple cage death match. The Guardians would own the tiebreaker over the Twins. The Twins would win the tiebreaker if they win this series against the Royals over the Royals. And the way that things are pacing, the Royals own the tiebreaker over the Guardians. Do not have a 3-way tie. Do not.
They all have to play in the field at the same time.
That would be entertaining as hell. But this is kind of how it's shaking up right now. I maybe it's just too many. It's just too far away with 4 games. That's still quite a bit of ground to make up. But then again, the Royals do have 7 more games against the Guardians. So I don't want to discount Kansas City's chances. And Bobby Witt Jr. has been playing like an MVP candidate this year as well.
Yeah, that's the Paul DeYoung difference you're talking about when it comes to the Royals making the late surge. The Royals strike me as like a little bit of a weaker version of the Guardians in that, basically a lot of their situations revolve around getting innings to Bobby Witt Jr. and maybe Vinny Pasquantino as well, except probably Sal Perez is like their the solid third bat that the Guardians really struggle to sustain from a year-to-year basis. But otherwise, like it's similar in terms of a lot of dead spots in their lineup. I would say the difference is that maybe they bulked up the rotation a little bit more at the deadline, whereas their bullpen is more of an adventure. Hunter Harvey is already on the injured list, so one of their additions is already sidelined and maybe can't make the impact they were hoping. So they're guessing a little bit in late games, whereas the Guardians have an order worked out for their bullpen. It's just more a matter of can they get the 5 innings they need to set up their bullpen. So similar shapes of offenses and pitching staffs, just different orders to just how they get things done. But I think maybe the Royals are maybe a year away from ironing out enough roster spots to close the gap. But it wouldn't shock me just because there is a whole lot of areas of weakness or underperformance with the Royals to where, like, if they just had one reliever step up or one outfielder step up, then they could really have some kind of I think that impact would be outsized in a way that one player turning it on doesn't necessarily make.
And the Guardians do have 3 more games against the White Sox. That also helps the Guardians. But then again, they are 5-5 against the White Sox this season.
Yeah, the White Sox own them.
The White Sox own them. Yes. So we'll see. Let us know. I'm going to stick with the Guardians. I like the Royals' chances better than the Twins' chances of winning the AL Central. But this is going to be a very fun race to watch the rest of the season. All 3 teams, I think, at this moment are going to make the postseason, which is crazy to think about. The American League Central, prior to this season, we thought this was going to be a very weak division. And now they could have 3 playoff teams. That's pretty incredible for the American League Central. So we'll see in how it shakes up, especially this week between the Twins and Royals.
Yeah, and I do wonder when we hear from Chris Getz over the winter, given how much of the AL Central's perceived weakness was a big talking point for what lay ahead for the White Sox and how steep the hill is that they have to climb. I'm wondering if they reframe that a little bit, if the AL Central suddenly has 3 postseason teams and the Tigers being a respectable 4th.
Yeah, the division could be a lot tougher, which complicates matters when you're through a rebuild like the White Sox are. Let's take a look around Major League Baseball outside of the AL Central. James, what's catching your attention other than your amazing fantasy baseball?
I mean, they are amazing. Thank you for saying that. I think anytime you can win, let me check the standings. Because this win isn't processed yet. I said 61. We're going to be 17-1 over the course of the week. 17 out of 18 games is a magical run. To be a part of it, to see the community between those guys in the clubhouse, the way they stick together through all of it, speaks to the culture that we've built here over this I can't even keep a straight face. I think it's natural to look at like how guys are doing post trade deadline, and certainly examples like that stick out are Michael Kopech looking dominant with Los Angeles, and Eloy Jimenez becoming a bit god in Baltimore. I would certainly, as someone who watched Eloy a lot in person in the minors, I feel like we kind of know when it looks like what we expected and when it doesn't. And it's not yet in this region where it's like they've re-engineered the 2019 Eloy, and it begs like an immediate question, why the White Sox couldn't get that. Kopech looks great. He kind of looks like how he should have looked as a reliever in terms of, and I also wonder if there's going to be a little, I've seen a lot of highlights of NL West hitters swinging at fastballs that are 6 inches to 8 inches over the strike zone, and I wonder if that goes down a little bit as familiarity goes with it. I think at this point Andres Jimenez had seen a face high Michael Kopech fastball enough times to kind of know that he was going to miss up a lot. But at the same time, I think with both of them, we knew that the talent was there, that they could go to maybe a better organization and probably take off. And it's going to be hard to watch that, and it's going to reflect poorly on the White Sox, what they did here to get the most out of them. At the same time, I feel like there's got to be some sort of vertical limit in how much you get wrapped up in that, because it's not like a solution was holding on to them. I think we had watched both of them, the Sox kind of beat their head into the wall to a sufficient degree on both, where it's not like holding on to Kopech and thinking he's going to thrive at the White Sox, where his value is higher as a pure rental than it would have been as the year and a half left for a team that knew that can fix them. And I don't think anyone would be like, even if he was like slightly better 3 or 4 games right before he got traded, that obviously allowed Baltimore to have that kind of last second interest to think that he could fix under Brandon Hyde, who obviously worked with him earlier in his career with the Cubs. I don't think anyone's endorsing like, man, we just got to give Eloy more at bats to see what the ceiling is. Pick up that option. We're going to do this. The next year's the year. Even if you kind of know they're going to thrive, I think with both the exhaustion point in this organization had been reached, where it's already unfortunate. It's already a failure to really tap their ceilings here. Holding on to it in denial of and hoping that the value is going to get higher wouldn't have done any good. So I think the bitterness over seeing them thrive elsewhere, like, it's natural, but it's also like, it's not like the answers were keeping them in house and hoping the value goes up. Like they had pushed well beyond the exhaustion point with that. And the same could be true as much as his season's playing out extremely weirdly, and it seems like he's just not up for pushing his rehab farther, or still feeling discomfort in some way where it's getting increasingly likely we don't see Yohan Moncada again. It wouldn't be crazy. I wouldn't spend $100 million on it, but given the raw talent there, it wouldn't be crazy to see him get some deal and have a really good year for 1 year, or at least somewhere else, because that's the level of talent he was. That's why they pursued him in the first place. It's just so clear that it's not going to happen here, that it's hard to get too much more extra in umbrage about something that's kind of run its course in its current situation, which is a bad situation. The White Sox are at fault for that to obviously a great degree, but they can't make it better by denying it.
That's good stuff, James. How about you, Jim? What's catching your attention around baseball?
Do you know who the leader in home runs is in the second half?
Sure do, because that was going to be my point. Jake Burger, baby.
Yes. Yeah, speaking of former White Sox, and this is a case where it is one where the White Sox, they did trade him before, like it was abundantly clear what he could offer, and there wasn't the fatigue setting in and just being worn down by the just the toil of having to tolerate just what the White Sox don't do. So like that's a case of halfway into the season, or at least maybe by early June, you're thinking, oh, the Jake Eater trade is back on, and it's looking like Kenny Williams knew what he was doing, and now Eater is struggling to find a foothold as a starter in AAA, and looks like he might be a reliever. And Burger has pretty much pulled his numbers back to where they were last year. He's pretty close to being that credible DH bat again. That might be just a little bit too slug heavy for some people's comfort, but he's back. So yeah, that's grabbed my attention certainly, because while the White Sox, he wouldn't be making the difference for the White Sox being, it maybe makes slight difference in terms of the White Sox being historically bad versus just very, very terrible history challenging bad. It is still an asset that they just decided to trade in a very strange manner. And, there is the sense that they maybe shouldn't get away so clean. Other thing I've noticed and enjoyed is the National League firming up. Like the wild card race is no longer like one team, one decent team and a whole bunch of mediocrity is kind of trying to climb above 500. They kind of match the American League in terms of two quality runner-ups, both in the NL West. And then the Braves are just the ones that are kind of lagging behind right now because they've just been so obliterated by injury that they're just trying to piece together a rotation and an outfield and everything like that. But it's nice to see that you're getting away from that just situation where one good week can get the Reds back in it, or get even the Nationals or Pirates can be counted out for a long amount of time. And now it's a case of the Padres added, they're being rewarded for added. And that's cool to see. Like when you see teams push for a postseason spot, just don't treat it as something they can stumble into and look like they're actually seeing success and being rewarded for pursuing that goal.
Yeah, the Dodgers and Phillies are now tied with the best record in the National League. You have the Dodgers visiting the Milwaukee Brewers this week, in which the Brewers are just a game and a half back of both the Phillies and Dodgers for the best record in the National League. So that's another series to watch if you don't want to watch the White Sox get blown out by the Yankees. And while the Dodgers have caught the Phillies, the Diamondbacks and the Padres are just 3.5 games back of the Dodgers in the National League West. So that has become a big race. But back to Jake Burger and one of my favorite things to do on this podcast, which is just take a heavy sigh and voice my displeasure of Andrew Vaughn's Major League Baseball career. Since Jake Burger has been traded to the Miami Marlins, which is a little more than a year ago, August 2nd, 2023, Jake Burger has played 148 games for the Marlins. That's almost a full season. He's hit 30 homers for the Marlins with 79 RBIs. He's got a 790 OPS. He's batting .265, .316 on base percentage, slugging .474 for the Marlins. Andrew Vaughn, same time frame, 161 games, 22 homers, 74 RBIs, batting .249 with a .295 on base percentage and slugging just .409. That's a .704 OPS. In the last 30 games, Burger has 14 home runs. That's the same exact total that Andrew Vaughn has in 108 games this season. And in that 30-game stretch, Burger is slugging .739, which is higher than Vaughn's season OPS. They traded the wrong guy. And this goes back to things that we voiced our frustration with Rakan, Jim. Like, why was Andrew Vaughn ever untouchable? I'll never get it. They traded the wrong guy.
He'll probably wind up leading the team in home runs.
Yay, with 17. Oh, well, is it still Vaughn that would lead the team or Dion?
He's got to get to 19, but
you are confident he's got 5 more?
Spot.
All right.
It's not impossible.
Not impossible, but I'm not that confident.
He's done it before while having an otherwise underwhelming season. I wouldn't put it past him to do it again.
Yeah, he'll hit 3 against Detroit in the final weekend to get to 20. He'll get to 20 again, but it's just very unsatisfactory, and it raises a question of what the heck do you do with him going into this offseason? He's still cheap. You can still roll out with him if in a season that you're not expecting to win, but at some point you want to pivot, and if he's not someone that's going to be anchoring in the middle of your lineup, what do you do?
What if Andrew Benintendi leads the team in homers?
And Benintendi's been on fire.
He's figured out, he's unlocked the wind tunnel to right field.
Finally.
Yes. So I mean, like, what if he gets to 20 and Vaughn doesn't? I would consider that. I would have considered that a very successful season until everything else.
You know what helps Vaughn is that Gavin Sheets is awful. I don't know. It's supposed to be around Major League Baseball, and there's just some White Sox players.
He just gets sucked back into the White Sox.
Just sucked right back into it.
And what if this weekend the late game substitute found a position that Lenny Sosa is actually excellent at?
I was
first
shocked.
base?
He made good plays. He made 2 good plays against the Cubs. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. I'm sure you guys definitely have thoughts about Jake Berger and Andrew Vaughn, so let us hear it in the comment section, or let us hear how you guys feel about the upcoming American League Central race, or what's catching your attention around Major League Baseball on SoxMachine.com. But thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you just discovered the podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. You can also listen and watch the show on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SoxMachine. If you do, please hit the subscribe button to our channel so you're notified of our upcoming videos. We greatly appreciate that. You can also follow us on social media. We're at Sox Machine. James will be at the games this week covering it again for us at Guarantee Ray Field. Follow him at JR Fegan, and you can follow me at SoxMachine_Josh and laugh at my wonderful season ticket holder cap that I just received from the White Sox this weekend. If you just discovered Sox Machine, or if you've been a longtime lurker of Sox Machine, but you haven't signed up yet on Patreon, what are you doing? I'm kidding, kind of. But if you want full access to our coverage, sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. And this is a pretty important week as well, because again, James is going to North Carolina this upcoming weekend, and he's going to be interviewing all these new draftees for the White Sox, and all these new players have been added to the farm system. So if you want to read up what's going to be part of the White Sox future, go to patreon.com/Sox Machine, sign up. Monthly plans start at $5, gets you full access, including ad-free versions of the podcast and website, and then you'll be able to get all the coverage that James will be having from North Carolina this upcoming weekend. So again, go to patreon.com/Sox Machine to sign up. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.